I'm in the mood. I'm feeling rude. I'm feeling hot. I want to run. The feeling exciting. So darling, let's do something. I wanna rub my body on your body. Rub my body on your body. Let me rub my body on your body. I wanna rub my body on your body. I wanna rub and love him. I wanna rub and kiss him. I wanna rub and jam him. I wanna rub and rub him. I wanna rub my body on your body. Rub my body on your body. Let me rub my body. Rub my body on your body. I just get paid. I want to play. The vibes is right. I wanna hug up tight. No time to waste. I wanna work my waist. So come on, babes. Give me a taste. I wanna rub my body on your body. I wanna rub my body on your body. Let me rub my body on your body. I wanna rub my body.
If you are looking to have your statutory declaration, affidavit of income, identity, damage or lost passport, lost license, tenancy agreement, agreement of settlement, power of attorney, last will and testament, and certification of documents, then you need to visit the Alistair Collins firm, located at the Killian Mall, 162 Lamaha Street, in Georgetown, between Camp and Waterloo Street. Alistair Collins is a commissioner of oaths and a justice of the peace. Make certain you visit him or call for more information at 649-6410 or 685-6448 or 503-1451. And there's adequate parking available. Go down to the Alistair Collins firm and have all of your legal issues settled and brought to the fore. Alistair Collins Firm. Contact them at Alistair Collins Firm.
Hello, this is attorney Shellen Washington, owner and founder of the Washington Law Firm, located at 455 Utica Avenue in Brooklyn, New York. We're specialized in medical malpractice, personal injuries, matrimonial law, and landlord and tenant. If you're in need of legal representation, please give us a call today. The number to call is 718-877-3100. Consultation is free at no cost to you. So call us today to see if we can be of any assistance to your legal needs. Again, the phone number to call us is 718-877-3100.
All right. Hey, guess what? Good evening and welcome back. For those of you who joined me shortly on that aborted program earlier, forgive me, please. I must apologize for those. I'm not seeing some of those who were on the previous link. They're not on here as yet. That is because I've had a senior citizen moment where, and I got to admit that, right, where I thought that I was broadcasting from the correct studio, until our guest Nigel Hughes stepped in and said, hey, he didn't say, hey, boss man, because, you know, these days people in certain high offices, they're using the term boss. I done with that, right? Boss, I done with that. I guess that's where we are right now in terms of the politics. Boss, I done with that. So Nigel Hughes actually said, hey, but I'm in the studio waiting for you. That's when I realized I had experience for the first or maybe second time a senior citizen moment. So please do forgive me. Nigel Hughes is with us this evening. But just before we get to Nigel Hughes, let me welcome all of you to the show. And I ask that you share the link. That's all I will do. Once I will ask you guys to share the link. And once I will say, thank you guys for sharing the link. I'm not going to ask you again to share the link. Neither am I going to say thank you for sharing the link. But from the bottom of our hearts here at 107.1 FM, we do appreciate all of you who do share the link. Now, let's get down to business. Lots of things we want to talk about. In fact, lots and lots of things we want to talk about this evening. But where can we start? We had kind of like a false start, so to speak. And so I got to get back into that groove, into that mood. And so, hey, where do we begin? Where do we begin? You know what is happening in Guyana. The hottest thing right now, or should be the hottest thing right now, not the Queen's death. Certainly, there are people who are mourning her death, but that is not the hottest thing right now for us. The hottest thing is the Bascom, Detective Sergeant Bascom, Dion Bascom's situation. And it looks as though this diabolical conspiracy against him, they are closing in on him. And I'm becoming more and more worried for his safety, and that is the safety of his family as well. But his lawyer this evening, Nigel Hughes, is with us to discuss that matter. Just if Nigel can just spare us just a minute or so, since we had that false start. The withdrawal of charges by the DPP, in my opinion, I just want to give you guys a quick run through as to what's happening. This is the DPP, Miss Shalimar Hack. She is also a senior counsel. And let's go through some things that are rather suspicious to me in terms of the haste in withdrawing charges against individuals and then rush to institute charges against other set of folks. So Shalimar Hack, she is the DPP, which is the Director of Public Prosecution. People may have a substitute for prosecution. People may say persecution. And I've had my experience in terms of, I'm mixing up the three P's. Let's move away from that. As you know, in 2016 or 2017, there was this big controversy concerning Prattville land and the allocation of house lots. During Jack Deere's presidency, lots of people, including then Army Chief of Staff Gary Best, got a piece of land. And then the then PNCR chairman for Region 10, Mortimer Mingo, also got a piece of land, albeit he said that he didn't occupy, he didn't do anything there because he wrote them a check. That's according to him. He wrote them a check and the check bunks, right? And so he didn't get a chance to occupy that. But DPP Shalimar Hack was questioned concerning that land deal. I don't know what happened to it, but there could have been a settlement. Just not sure what really happened. But that's and this is where Jack Deere's property, Prattville, is. A lot of those big ones got properties, got house lot there. Priya Manik Chen, then Minister of Human Services. I think she moved on to become Minister of Education. Then she's back again as Minister of Education. And so there were lots of controversy surrounding this plot of land. And mind you, I want you to know that that plot of land, it is highly controversial, not because of those individuals who were allotted piece of lots, house lots there, but the manner in which it was actually taken away from a family who have since claimed that it's ancestral land. And so Jack Deere is accused, mind you, of grabbing these folks' ancestral lands. And now let's begin. What else we want to look at this here? The DPP withdraws charges against accused cop killer. And this accused cop killer back in the not so long ago, Nigel Hughes was actually the lawyer representing Mr. Shaka Chase. And Shaka Chase was wrongfully accused. In fact, he was tortured and all manner of things. He won that case in the High Court by then acting Chief Justice, the late Ian Chang. And this is when Shaka Chase, his family members were in tears and there were protests, lots and lots of protests out there that was able to force the DPP to withdraw the charges, the murder charges against Mr. Shaka Blair. He has sued them. He won that case, and I guess he's still waiting for his money. But let's move on to other charges. DPP withdraws attempted suicide charge against rape victim. And again, we look at this because this is suspicious. You have a rape victim. Seriously, you have a rape victim who attempted suicide. And because of the laws in Guyana, the antiquated law where if you attempt suicide and you survive, they are going to charge you. It's a crime. And so this rape victim attempted suicide, and the director of public prosecution actually instituted charges against that rape victim until there was a public outcry, some women's group, and so forth. And so the DPP was actually forced to withdraw those charges. And let's go on to other charges. Look at DPP, ex-Army chief, question on Pradoville land, DPP husband, question. Mind you, question. They were just questioned. And so I want to make sure that I make that point lucidly clear. And now let's move on to this other case that was withdrawn by the DPP because in the first place, there was no evidence to charge this young man, but he was charged by the DPP. And after there was a confession statement by another individual, they have decided and evidence against the other individuals. They had no other choice. And this guy had spent a couple of weeks or months or so forth in prison, compliments of the DPP chamber. So I'm just walking you through some of the injustices over the years and what happens at the DPP chambers. Most of the times they do not get it right. And most of the times when we see the charges are being withdrawn, it is always questionable. And so we see here now DPP withdraws application to forfeit $9 million seized from Barry Dataram. A lot of you may not know who Barry Dataram is. Barry Dataram has escaped from the U.S. He ran away to Guyana, and he's been sitting there for years. They've been after him to extradite him back to the U.S., and so there's been, he seemed to have had a lot of friends in the PPP. And so $9 million seized, as you see here, the chambers of the Director of Public Prosecutions, DPP, yesterday withdrew an application for the forfeiture of $9 million that had been seized from convicted drug trafficker Barry Dataram and his brother Troy Dataram. And so the DPP chamber says, it's okay, we're going to withdraw the charges. Okay, let him go. And then we look at this here. We don't want to be unfair, right? Look at this headline. It can be misleading. And I'll explain to you guys why it's misleading. It says here, DPP withdraws private charges against Lowenfield, appoints special prosecutors. But here's why. It's not like she actually did any favor to Mr. Lowenfield or Roxanne Myers or whoever. So again, don't let the headlines fool you. Here's why that the DPP chamber, had no other choice but to withdraw those private charges against these individuals. Here's why. Following a hearing yesterday, Lowenfield attorney Nigel Hughes, who is with us this evening, confirmed the withdrawal of the charges, and a source told Stabrook News that the decision was due to the fact that the police had filed similar charges. Good. So you got me as to why this is an incorrect headline, because she had no other choice but to withdraw the charges because there were already similar charges in the court. And so don't be fooled by that headline, right? Let's move on here now. DPP withdraws against murder accused. This is the case that I was telling you guys about. Mr. Gonzalez was murdered in Kitty, and the youngster in the middle was wrongfully charged, spent some time in prison, and they had no evidence against this young man. So lots and lots of injustices there at the DPP chambers, my opinion. And mind you, I'm speaking from personal experience as well. But let's move on. Here it is. DPP withdraws appeal against judge's decision to free Marcus Bisram. The withdrawal, all of the withdrawals. And I hope you guys get the picture where I'm coming from with this, right? The withdrawals upon withdrawals upon withdrawals. And then we got this here. DPP withdraws charge against Nandalal for alleged theft of law books. Withdraw. And we see this, that there is a pattern of these withdrawals. And then we look at this. DPP withdraws charges against cops accused of shooting unarmed man. Lots of things. And then we get another withdrawal, not from the bank this time, but a withdrawal of private criminal charges against the sitting crime chief. The crime chief is Mr. Blattam. And so Detective Sergeant Dion Bascom has filed criminal charges against Mr. Blanham. What is it? Cybercrime. And so the DPP withdrew the charges. She said, "That's it. I'm withdrawing these charges." But it is the same Bascom who appeared in court yesterday to answer three charges similar in nature. Cybercrime. He was placed on $300,000 bail, his passport taken away because they see him as someone who will flee the jurisdiction. Hypocrisy upon hypocrisy upon hypocrisy. This evening, we have the lawyer for Mr. Bascom. He's here with us. His name is Nigel Hughes, no stranger to you guys. Mr. Hughes, thank you so much for your patience, sir. Good evening. And your microphone, sorry about that, your mic.
Good evening, Mark. Always a pleasure to be in your program. I wish you a really good evening. And again, commend you for the good work you do.
Thank you so much. And I appreciate your time out as well. Let's get straight down to business. Your client, Detective Sergeant Bascom, filed private criminal charges against the crime chief, Mr. Blanham, pertaining to cybercrime act or cybercrime criminal charges against the sitting crime chief. And lo and behold, the DPP chamber says, "That's it. We're not going to have these charges go ahead. We are going to withdraw those charges against Mr. Blanham, the crime chief." Your take on that, sir?
Well, Mark, you were tracing the history of several cases where the Director of Public Prosecutions had actually withdrawn charges against various people. This one is particularly egregious and different. Before a decision is taken to withdraw charges, the DPP normally has to review the evidence that is available that led to the charges being brought. So what is normally done and what is required is that she would write to the person who has filed the private criminal charges and say, "Can you please provide me with the evidence that you have upon which you have filed these charges?" Because, of course, she needs to review them to see whether or not there is sufficient evidence. And in all the previous cases that I'm aware of, she had either written and requested the charges, or she actually had the files which had statements in them. In this case, the charge was filed yesterday. The summons has not even been served on Mr. Blanham. The DPP has never contacted either myself or Mr. Bascom and said, "Look, Mr. Hughes, I read in the press that you have filed private criminal charges. Can you please provide me with the evidence upon which you filed these charges?" We would then send to her statements that we have in our possession and other exhibits we intended to rely on. And she would then, as we anticipate, she would then write and say, "Thank you, Mr. Hughes. You've sent us the statements. I've reviewed these statements. I am going to withdraw the charges." None of that happened in this case. So what happened in this case is, without even asking for the evidence, without even inquiring about what evidence led to the filing of the charges, she has withdrawn the case. Now, office holders, especially constitutional office holders, are expected to act fairly and, more importantly, reasonably. In this case, she has no evidence. She has not asked for the evidence. She has not even gone through the perfunctory requirement of saying, "Can I have a look at the evidence?" But she has determined that she's going to withdraw this. And I read in the press, I'm assuming this is reliable, the reason why she is withdrawing this is because it's an attempt to intimidate the crime chief. Now, I just want to put that in context, Mark. The three charges that were brought yesterday against Mr. Bascom, two were brought by, referred to Mr. Caesar as the virtual complainant, who, as a result of this broadcast, said that he had been humiliated, and the other one was by Mr. Chabinath Singh. In neither of those cases, and of course, no statements were served in either of those cases because, of course, it was the first day and the charges were read. So we had no indication of who the intended witnesses were. So I don't even know if Mr. Blanham was one of the witnesses they had intended to call. So when they filed the charges, it got put down. The state prosecutor, Mr. Mandel Moore, indicated that the statements will be served on the next day. So we would not have been aware of what witnesses they're intended to call. So for the directed public prosecutions, assuming there's accuracy in the report that's in the press, to say that this was an attempt to intimidate one of the witnesses, we didn't even know whether or not Mr. Blanham was going to be called as a witness. And further, in order to establish the case, either on behalf of Mr. Caesar, the virtual complainant, or Mr. Chabinath Singh as the virtual complainant, neither of those cases would require testimony from Mr. Blanham. Because, of course, the person who is affected or who they claim or allege would be affected would be Mr. Caesar and Mr. Chabinath Singh. So I think this decision is particularly curious. Needless to say, we're not going to leave it there. This is going to be challenged. We're going to go to court for judicial review of this decision because, of course, I don't see the basis upon which the directed public prosecution, with the greatest respect, could probably have acted to withdraw charges when she was not even aware of the basis upon which we were going to advance those charges. And the law requires that if there is evidence that discloses criminal conduct, it is not up to her, except in cases of national security, it's not up to her to determine the outcome of those cases. That's why it goes through and goes to court. I saw that you referred to the case with Mr. Nirvan Singh, attorney, where she withdrawn the charges. And in that case, she said she had reviewed the police file with the investigation again with the allegations against Mr. Singh, and had arrived at the conclusion that there was not sufficient evidence. In this case, there is no police file in relation to the allegations that Mr. Bascom has made against Crime Chief Blanham. And you are well aware that Mr. Blanham, in the press conference that he held, where he was accompanied by the Commissioner of Police and Mr. Caesar, said very clearly that Mr. Bascom lied when he said that he took Mr. Bacchus into the police station. He called him very clearly a liar. He said he was mendacious, and he clearly, by those statements, was impugning his character because Mr. Bascom is still a serving member of the Guyana Police Force. So if the crime chief says to one of his lower ranks that you are mendacious or that you are lying because you did not bring a person in, and then Mr. Bacchus and his attorney, both of them, held press conferences in which both said that it was Mr. Bascom who actually took Mr. Bacchus into the CID and that his attorney turned up afterwards. So clearly, even without anything Mr. Bascom said, Mr. Blanham was proven to have been rather mendacious in his statement when he was attacking Bascom and saying that he did not take Bacchus in, because Bacchus is on evidence. I think you probably had him in your program saying that the person who took me in was indeed Mr. Bascom. So if that is the evidence, or if that is part of the evidence upon which the charges were founded, I'm only using this as an example, then it is not up to the Director of Public Prosecutions to determine whether or not a court will find that that was a cybercrime. Because here you would have the clear evidence of the crime chief at his own press conference accusing Mr. Bascom of being a liar, saying to him that he never took Mr. Bacchus in, and then you'd have the evidence of Mr. Bacchus saying, of course Mr. Bascom took me in. And so it's in those circumstances, the DPP, without even asking us for the evidence, without even asking us on what basis did you file this charge, Mr. Hughes, proceeds to exercise a power that is vested in her under the Constitution, in which she has a responsibility to act reasonably. And I dare say, with the greatest respect, her actions appear to be anything but that.
Absolutely. Nigel Hughes, attorney at law, is with us. We will get back to that because it's highly suspicious. And I'm glad that you've mentioned that you will be asking for judicial review. How long that process takes, because we noticed that cases such even elections petitions take years. How long judicial review takes in Guyana?
Well, judicial review is relatively quick and efficient. So what happens is that you go to court and you ask for an order directed to the authority that has made the decision that you seek to challenge. In this case, the Director of Public Prosecution. You set out the grounds upon which you are seeking this order. In this case, we'd be seeking an order of certiorari to quash her decision to withdraw the charges. We'd set out those facts. She gets an opportunity to respond, and then the court makes a determination as to whether or not she acted within her powers. And if the court is of the view that she clearly could not have acted within her powers, the court will quash her decision. If the court is of the view that there was a basis upon which she could have acted, then they'll say, no, we're not going to grant the order. I think either way, this is definitely going to make its way, certainly to the CCJ, if we are unhappy with the decisions in the lower courts.
It seems as though you guys are on the right track, because we cannot have anyone sitting there in the office of the DPP and make these sort of decision with any sort of due process or transparency. There seem to be a lacking of due process here in this particular case, but I'm not the lawyer. You are the lawyer, and we are here to listen to your legal opinions and your advice. But let us move on now. Yesterday, Mr. Bascom was charged. Three charges where policemen, his colleagues, are saying that they're hurt, that he inflicted some sort of emotional distress by just mentioning their names in an innocuous manner. And so three charges. What is your take as it pertains to these, in my opinion, frivolous charges against Detective Bascom?
Mark, I think I should perhaps start with the most curious of those charges. And that is the one where they allege that Mr. Bascom used the computer system at Eve Leary. Can you imagine that? Can you imagine the police is saying that Mr. Bascom broadcasts from Eve Leary some statement that would have hurt these virtual complainants? So that means that he had to be in the police station, because the only buildings that are in Eve Leary are police buildings, whether there's no civilian building there. And therefore, if he was sitting down in CID headquarters or wherever in Eve Leary broadcasting, what exactly were the police doing? Did they host the press conference where he was making these statements? So that charge is most curious. The other two charges suggest that they took place in Hatfield Street. I'm assuming that they haven't indicated this, but I'm assuming the references to the fact that the press conference was held at the chambers of Hughes, Fields, and Stobie. And if you recall that press conference, Mr. Bascom made no statements in relation to either Mr. Caesar or Mr. Chabinot Singh. He merely said that he relied on what, matter of fact, he didn't even say that. He merely confirmed that he had made two previous broadcasts, and then members of the press were there. You took it live, Mark, so I'm assuming that you probably facilitated what they accuse him of committing this cybercrime. These are really unbelievable. But what was the most disturbing thing, and this is perhaps what citizens need to be concerned about. When we applied for bail for Mr. Bascom, Mr. Bascom is a sergeant. He's in the Guyana Police Force. He is a serving member of the Guyana Police Force. The state prosecutor, Mr. Moore, got up and said he was opposing bail. Naturally, the magistrate asked him, on what basis are you seeking to have the liberty of Mr. Bascom withdrawn? And Mark, this is verbatim. He said, Mr. Bascom has a passport and has a visa. That's what he said first. Mr. Bascom has a passport and a visa. So the magistrate naturally inquired of him, a visa for where? And he said he didn't know. So this is the state, the police advisor and prosecutor getting up and saying, I want this policeman to be locked up and placed on remand because he has a passport and a visa. Mark, I don't know what percentage of people in Guyana have passports and visas, but this certainly is not an insignificant number. And that cannot be a basis upon which anybody should have their liberty taken away. The Constitution gives you the right to enter and leave Guyana. It's not a matter of discretion. It is a fundamental right in the Constitution that you're entitled to leave Guyana. And the police prosecutor said, we want this man's liberty removed because he has a passport, and in that passport is a visa. It gets worse. So the magistrates, I don't want to assume. The magistrate says, but surely there must be some other basis. And then the prosecutor said, we heard rumors that he's going around asking for money to leave the country. And that is the basis on which they want this man to be locked up and placed in the Georgetown prison or the Lusignan prison or whichever other prison. A serving police sergeant who they've not removed from the Guyana police forces yet. They want him put in the lockups because he has a passport with a visa and he's going around asking for money. This is the same man that is accused by a prominent businessman of being funded by the second wealthiest businessman who exports gold. So why would he be going around the place begging for money to leave the country if you're suggesting that he is well funded? This is absolutely scary. This gets prominence because, of course, it's in the press. But think of the amount of other citizens where they go to court and the police merely say, look, he got a passport and which has a visa, and we hear that he's begging for money to leave the country. And that is the basis upon which they ask the court to remand somebody into custody. That is a deadly, scary state of affairs.
Absolutely. Deadly, scary, and some other things I want to mention, but we are live. And I know sometimes when I'm on with you, Nigel, I'm very careful. Very, very careful. You're a lawyer. You always caution us to use legal terms, and so I don't want to mention those adjectives around you at all, with all due respect. But there's a question that I want to ask as it pertains to this individual, Mr. Moore, who is the legal advisor for the police. He also appeared in court. He turned up in court, so to speak, yesterday, claiming to be the special prosecutor in this case, in the Bascom's case, in order to prosecute Mr. Bascom over those frivolous, trumped-up cybercrime. I don't know. Did he receive the proper documents presented? I think it's called a fiat or something like that. Did you see that? Did he present that? And in what manner was he representing him or being this special prosecutor? Sorry.
Right. So it's called a fiat. You get a fiat from the Director of Public Prosecutions to present the case on behalf of the state. Now, that's an old Latin term that says you are empowered by an order from the director, an authorization from the Director of Public Prosecutions to act in her stead and present the case. Now, Mr. Moore did not present any such fiat in court yesterday. As a matter of fact, in another cybercrime case, he had the same problem, which is a cybercrime case against Mr. Sherrod Duncan at the Diamond Magistrates Court. And in that case, Magistrate Judy Latchman inquired of Mr. Moore whether he had a fiat. And at the time the inquiry was made, he had no fiat.
Sorry, is it Magistrate Latchman or the Chief Magistrate? Which one of the magistrates?
No. This present case is before Latchman, but I'm referring to a similar case in which he was prosecuting. So he is the prosecutor in the case against Sherrod Duncan. You will remember that Sherrod Duncan has been charged with cybercrimes, where a reference is being made to trench crapaud and jagabat and all those terms, which are apparently offensive.
Yeah.
And in that case, Mr. Moore presented himself before Magistrate Lutchman, who is conducting the trial, and she inquired of him whether he had a fiat from the Director of Public Prosecutions. He did not have a fiat at the time, and so Miss Latchman, the magistrate, said to him, you have to go get the fiat and come back, because you won't be allowed to prosecute before me unless you have a fiat. And yesterday, when this matter was called before the chief magistrate, this is the one against Mr. Bascom, there was no fiat presented to the court. I don't know if he had one or not, but certainly none was presented.
Well, let me ask you this, Mr. Nigel Hughes, and I am very familiar with this fiat because during my persecution, the so-called prosecutors, and I pronounce it how they usually pronounce it, they had to present a fiat, and they did before the matter started. The then Chief Magistrate Juliet Holder Allen actually asked them for that, and the lawyers wanted to see it as well. Did you find this to be rather suspicious that this young man just turned up and he's a legal advisor for the police? He turns up now to say that he's a special prosecutor in this case. With your years of experience, you just allow that to go, or didn't you ask?
No, the reason for that is that I was pretty confident that he was going to get a fiat from the Director of Public Prosecutions. So, raising the point and he's going to get it, so on the next occasion he produces it, doesn't affect the charge that was filed, because he didn't actually file the charge. The charge is actually filed by the police. He came to court as the lawyer who was going to present the case. So the absence of a fiat would not have affected the validity of the charge. It merely would have affected his ability to present the case.
Well, he actually, because he stood up and he made representation in terms of, as a special prosecutor, he asked the magistrate to deny bail. He gave reasons why.
Oh,
he
sure,
should not
absolutely.
have been allowed. He should not have been allowed to even speak on this matter.
Indeed. I mean, technically speaking, yes, you can argue that if he didn't present a fiat, it may well be that he had a fiat, he just didn't present it. Because we went straight into legal arguments on the question of jurisdiction and other issues in relation to the charges. So yes, we did not challenge it, only because we anticipate that the Director of Public Prosecution would have issued him one, given that that has been the history. And certainly what happened in Sheriff Duncan's case was enough experience on our part to anticipate what sort of conduct the DPP would have undertaken.
And I respect the fact that you're always transparent, but in such a manner, you have been practicing law for all these years. And if I'm a magistrate, I'm not just going to allow somebody to walk into my courtroom to say that he or she is the special prosecutor. I want to see documents. And in the interest of transparency, those documents ought to be presented to the defense counsel. Lawyers.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
The magistrate failed to ask for
well, you'll remember in the elections case, in that flurry of cases that came on the heels of the announcement of the election results with Mr. Mingo, Ms. Lawrence, Ms. Joseph, Mr. Lowenfield, Ms. Myers, when those cases were presented, several of the special prosecutors did not have fiats when they turned up. They subsequently got them, of course. But they did not have them initially. And I remember when they came to court, they kept saying they're going to get them, and the chief magistrate kept insisting that they got the appropriate fiat. And I think eventually, maybe after about a month or thereabouts, they provided them.
Absolutely, and they should not be given any power to speak on behalf of anything in the courtroom. Unfortunately, we have to assume that Mr. Moore had none because he presented none. Albeit we will hear that he had it in his pocket, but he failed to take it out, and it may be backdated and all manner of things. Let's move on, please, Mr. Hughes. And for those of you who are now joining us, good evening and welcome to Straight Up. These charges and $300,000 bail, we see the sort of injustices, the hypocrisy and so forth, where the cybercrime law that should not have been even in existence, but it is, it seems to be just a political tool to target political opponents. I don't know if you share that view.
Oh, absolutely. I think it's a bad law. It should never have been passed, because technically, Mark, if you say to me on this program, Mr. Hughes, you're an ugly son of a gun, and I am hurt, I am heartbroken that you said that, then I can go and file a charge saying you have used the electronic media to humiliate me. If you think about it, Mr. Duncan is before the court because he referred to somebody as a trench crapple. and a gutter rat? Really? Are we at that stage? And then we run people through the courts. And in the case of Mr. Bascom, a sergeant, he has to find $300,000 and lodge his passport because Mr. Blanham is hurt. Oh, sorry, not Mr. Blanham, because Mr. Caesar is hurt and Mr. Chabinot Prasad is hurt, particularly where they're police officers, and I'm sure things that are particularly offensive have been said in relation to them. It's an awful law and should never have been passed. It's amazing. Anyway, that's a entirely other another story.
It's kind of ironic. It's beyond that too. That over the past 2 years, we have seen maybe all men filing charges through the cybercrime, that dotish cybercrime law that was passed under the previous administration. I just thought I mentioned that. All men seem to be hurt. First, it was the guy who sits there as the Minister of Sports, Youth, and Culture. He was hurt. He suffered infliction of emotional distress. Something somebody said that caused him distress. So all these men are hurt. Their feelings are hurt. Where do we go now with this Bascom? Three charges, three
That's
frivolous
not all.
charges.
The police officer that called me to tell me that Mr. Bascom should go to court was an officer called Mr. Reed. I think he's retired and back with the force, Simeon Reed. He actually said there are more charges which are going to be filed against him further up the East Coast. So they have more cybercrime charges which are going to be filed up the East Coast. I assume that I will be notified today or tomorrow, not today, sorry, sometime tomorrow about those charges.
Yeah, well, there should be cybercrime charges against the acting commissioner of police, cybercrime charges against the crime chief. I guess when those charges are filed, if at all they're filed, we already see what direction the DPP chambers is heading. We already see that. I don't know. I'm looking at some of the comments. People are way beyond upset. That's just a mild term in saying that they are upset about the situation. There are other things pertaining to this case that we want to talk about. The haste in which the police force rushed to have Mr. Bascom brought before the court and to have his passport taken away, all because they are of the view that he was planning to flee the jurisdiction. And as you've mentioned before...
No, Mark?
Yeah.
I don't think that they thought he was going to flee the jurisdiction. They want to curtail his movements.
Gotcha.
And I think that it's a little bit more sinister than that. As you know, Mr. Bascom's life has been threatened. He has made that public. He said it repeatedly. He actually reported one of those threats to the Guyana police force. And he actually asked for witness protection from nobody else but than the president. And up to today, Mr. Bascom has not had the courtesy of a response from His Excellency. So trying to take away his passport, I think, is a clear indication of something perhaps a little bit more sinister than they're thinking that he wants to leave the country. Because I think everybody knows that if you really want to leave Guyana, you don't really need a passport.
Absolutely. You are correct. And thank you so much for clarifying that. I've noticed somebody's dying for me to answer a question that is a pretty obvious question, that if you don't pay your bail, you go to jail.
Absolutely. If you
If
don't raise the bail.
Your bail, if you don't have enough money for the bail, you go to jail. That's it. It's done.
I have to share this with you. So
Sure,
what was very interesting yesterday? So while Mr. Bascom is waiting to be bailed, of course, the entire court and the court compound is crawling with special branch policemen. They're all over. They're standing up at the gate. They're standing up in the court compound. They're in heavily tinted cars outside of the court. And I'm assuming that a couple of things. They were trying to see who was going to bail Mr. Bascom. His wife was there, of course. And they probably wanted to find out where he was going to go afterwards. So it was quite an interesting morning. And you know, these special branch people are not difficult to detect, I dare say.
Well, Mr. Hughes, you know, for many years I've had my experience with those special branch guys. they're not very difficult to detect. They're not very difficult to identify. In fact, some of them had to cry when I cornered them with my vehicle. They said, "Oh man, I'm just doing my job, man." So we know who they are, and I'm glad they're easily identifiable. But
As a
here,
matter of fact,
go ahead, sir.
the special branch car that was involved in the incident in Alboystown 2 nights before, where I think it might have been some sort of where the citizenry had an interaction with the Guyana police force. It's the same special one.
An interesting and good interaction. Go
They
ahead.
had an
That
interesting
was the guys
interaction
in
with it.
Cowboys Town. Go
I'm
ahead.
not going to categorize it, but that
Yeah,
same car was outside, was one of the special branch vehicles that was outside of the court, waiting on Mr. Bascom to come out of the court.
gotcha. Those special branch cars and motorcycles, and people know who they are. Mr. Hughes, how much the three charges that were rushed, that we saw that Mr. Bascom had to rush to be presented before Chief Magistrate. This is the Chief Magistrate, Miss McLennan. How much this had to do with it? Breaking news, according to Village Voice, Sergeant Bascom charged, met U.S. investigators, and shared vital information. That's according to the Village Voice. Do you believe that they saw and they had some connection to this, based on what we're seeing here in the newspaper, that he may have met with investigators from wherever, and that they thought that something had happened and he will be leaving the country soon? So here is where we charge him, placed him before the court so that we can snatch his passport away from him.
I can't speak about whether Mr. Bascom met investigators or not. I am not aware of that of information to that in relation to that. But if there is accuracy in this, I suppose what you've said is possible. But I'm not aware myself. As you know, it's a very high risk operation for Mr. Bascom to come meet me at the office simply because he's a target.
He is a target. He is a walk-in target. How is Mr. Bascom feeling in light of this new latest development? The DPP chambers decided that the crime chief should not be charged at all. How is he feeling, sir?
Well, I actually I spoke to him exceedingly briefly after the news broke, because when the news broke, I should say the first place I read it was not one of the established media like yourself or Gordon or one of the other electronic media. So I wasn't quite sure whether it was accurate, but then it started to appear in mainstream media. And I really was, I should say that Mr. Bascom was shocked. Is not how I felt. He was shocked, not in the sense that it was not anticipated, because I said to him from the time we filed the private criminal charge that the DPP is going to send and that she's going to ask us for the evidence. So we have his statement and we have the exhibits that we were going to respond with. And I said, we're going to send this to the DPP, but expect and anticipate that the DPP, after she has reviewed the statements that you have, is likely to withdraw the charges. That's just based on our historic experience of the actions of the Director of Public Prosecutions. But Mr. Bascom certainly was a little astounded that the summons, after this charge is filed, a summons has to be served on Mr. Blanham for him to come to court. No, our internal intelligence disclosed that Mr. Blanham gave instructions, or instructions were given. I can't say they were given by Mr. Blanham. Instructions were given that if there was an attempt to effect service, that it should not necessarily be permitted. So we thought that, the sort of standard, we didn't serve him when this case comes back up. But we certainly didn't think that the Director of Public Prosecutions would withdraw the charge before it is served, before the summons is issued. And certainly in the absence of requesting evidence from us. She could have said, look, Mr. Hughes, I want to see this evidence by 5 o'clock in the afternoon. And if we didn't get it to her by 5 o'clock, she can say, well, I'm going to go ahead and act. But we certainly didn't think that she would not even request the evidence. There is no active investigation in which there's an allegation against Mr. Blanham by Mr. Bascom. So there's no police file which would contain statements as she had claimed in the case of Girvan Singh. So he is, of course, I would say, how would I put this gently? He is let me say he's perplexed by the fact that the legal system and those responsible for the administration of justice would operate in a manner such as this, where without even affording themselves an opportunity to examine the available evidence upon which the charge is founded, they would just merely act to withdraw those charges.
All right. 6 minutes after 10 o'clock, we're hearing about the situation with Detective Sergeant Bascom, and this is pertaining to revelations stemming from the murder probe of Mr. Fagundes, also known as Paper Shorts. And from the evidence, from what we're seeing, is that powerful people do not want this case to go ahead, this probe to go ahead, of which they still have a suspect. They have not invited the suspect for any interview, but their focus seemed to be only on Mr. Bascom, who has made the revelations. We are not seeing them going after the businessman to question him, mind you, concerning allegations leveled against him and his security guy, Mr. Mark Richmond, concerning the murder of this guy, Paper Shards, for goodness, known as Paper Shards. Mr. Nigel Hughes, your client, obviously, he is at death's door right now, so to speak. Lots of guns, legal guns and so forth pointing at him. How fearful is your client, and how fearful are you for your client, especially since the guy who sits there as the head of state pays no attention to your request for witness protection?
I am extremely concerned about the health and well-being of Mr. Bascom. We no longer anticipate that His Excellency will respond to the request. I think his actions have been particularly pellucid and loud in content, even though we haven't received a response. So the next thing Mr. Bascom has to do is he has to be exceedingly careful. He's still a serving member of the Guyana Police Force. We know that we've lost a lot of members of the Guyana Police Force while they were serving. So he takes the sort of precautions, or as best as he could, not to expose himself to danger. That does not guarantee any form of protection. But at this stage, given all the actions that we have seen, and it's not just the inability to secure a response from His Excellency, it's also the fact that the Regional Security Service that came to conduct a review apparently conducted a review of the case without even asking to speak to Mr. Bascom. That I find very, very interesting and most disturbing, that you have come to conduct a review that includes the question of whether or not the investigation into the murder of Mr. Fagundes was compromised by actions of those who might have been investigating it. And you do not even speak to the person who's alleged to have made these revelations, the whistleblower. So that's another aspect that we are particularly concerned about, because clearly the RSS report would find itself in difficult waters as a credible report. The RSS report, if we believe what the Ministry of Home Affairs has said about the report, which is that they found that Mr. Bascom only made these allegations after he had found himself as a suspect arrested in a narcotic operation conducted by Kanu, and therefore they didn't think his allegations were credible. Clearly, if they had spoken to Mr. Bascom and had bothered to conduct anything looking like an investigation, they would have found out long before Mr. Bascom's arrest. He had actually made reports not only to the Minister of Home Affairs, to several high-ranking persons, including the Commissioner of Police, about his concerns and the specific allegations he had made. He actually had a television interview with one of the established and senior journalists in which he made these allegations, and all of these things were done long before he was arrested. So he clearly could not have, unless he orchestrated his own arrest, he could not have anticipated at the time that he gave those statements.
In fact, Mr. Hughes, we are seeing a screenshot here of a message that Detective Sergeant Bascom sent back in April. It says here April 14th, way before he was arrested, while he was in some yard, he was rounded up. He was detained, sorry. He sent a message to the guy who sits there as the Minister of Home Affairs. This is what he said back.
Yep.
So go ahead. I just wanted to show that evidence.
No. I'm happy that you're putting it up because he has all this evidence. Now, again, he'd have to be particularly gifted to tell the future, in which case he probably won't be in the Guyana Police Force, to have anticipated his subsequent arrest. And so the entire basis of the RSS report, or I should say the entire basis upon which the RSS sought to discredit Mr. Bascom's statement, according to the Ministry of Home Affairs, is completely destroyed and evaporates when you look at the fact that he has been consistently making these allegations long before his arrest. So we're in a bad state where our regional security services, RSS, seem to have the same level of skill and qualification as the Guyana Police Force. And that leads us to a position where we have to go extra regional. We have to really go to people.
Just to pause for a second, again, Mr. Hughes, forgive me. I want our listeners to see exactly what is happening. He also sent the same message with evidence of threats and so forth to Mr. Irfan Ali on April 14. Here is the evidence. I don't know. Continue. Yeah. Sorry about that.
Mr. No. You see, I'm happy that you are bringing this evidence out because it is clear that Mr. Bascom was uncomfortable, to put it gently, with the manner in which that investigation was being conducted and what clearly appeared to be unorthodox decisions and unorthodox comments by lead investigators. As a matter of fact, 3 police officers got transferred. He himself, Mr. Sarabo, and I can't remember who the third one was. So here is this officer who clearly is uncomfortable as a law enforcement officer about the course of this investigation. So the RSS, it seems as if regionally we don't even have the capacity to have any sort of fair oversight into this investigation. And at the end of the day, Mark, we are back to square one.
Back to square one. Sorry, go ahead.
No solution, no investigation into a murder that happens less than 100 yards from the president's residence in bright lights with cameras, and it can't get solved. Now, if this is happening in the center of the city at one of its most popular night spots, what does it say about the capacity of the Guyana Police Force to solve something that has slightly less available clues?
And folks would have probably expected different from the members of the RSS that visited, one of them who visited Guyana and shared information with his colleagues via Zoom. How disappointed. I can tell you this, I am very disappointed, and I know most Guyanese should be disappointed in those RSS officers. But how disappointed are you as a lawyer?
Mark, it's difficult, I think, as a professional, or I should say a pretend professional, to maintain any level of mediocre or rudimentary confidence in the Guyana Police Force when you see their actions or inactions as often as any practitioner of the criminal bar sees them. Disappointment is not something that I would use because I expect the conduct that we see from the Guyana Police Force. I did have some higher hope and aspirations for a regional police force, but if you think about it, the Caribbean is not very dissimilar in the different territories. Every time you pick up a Trinidad newspaper on any day, or if you read the foreign news in the local newspapers about what happens in Trinidad, the capacity of that police force to be able to solve crimes is seriously challenged. And there are some pretty violent murders that are taking place in Trinidad and Tobago. So, and it's not, Jamaica, it's the same thing. So I had hoped that the collective investigative capacity of the region would have benefited from the best that had come through the system, and therefore we would have had a higher quality. It is clear. I mean, if what the RSS did on this occasion is an example of their best efforts, I think we're in deep trouble. And so I think no, we have to call for, and it's sad that we have to go to the UK, United Kingdom, or the United States, or Canada to come and solve what really is a basic crime. This is not a complex crime with you're dealing with an international terrorist with international financing. So you have to try and trace the money, try and track down the person, the kind of high-end, higher level criminal activity. This is a pretty straightforward crime. You got witnesses, they got cell towers, they can identify the phone calls, you can see where there's a concentration of calls, and we can't solve it. And then we have the regional organization coming in and saying, yeah, you can't solve it.
Clear-cut case, because when they came for the Henry Boy's murder, the evidence and everything, they were washed away. The rains came, they washed away everything, and they came basically to watch something with nothing at all. But before they left Guyana, they said that the police can solve this crime. Now, here is a crime, a murder crime, a probe, where they have lots of evidence, but they walk away saying nothing at all in favor of justice. In fact, if I were one of those RSS officers, and I say that just to be, respectful, I wanted to add another
vowel.
Vowel, indeed.
Between the R and the S.
Yeah, but I wouldn't add an A right now. We're public, so I wouldn't put the A there now. RSS. It's funny how they entered Guyana and didn't ask. If were I an investigator, the first person that I would want to interview is the whistleblower. I would ask, where is Mr. Bascom? I need to sit at least for 1 hour with Mr. Bascom. The fact that they haven't done that is highly suspicious.
The other thing that I gather occurred, I can't say this with any certainty, is that when they did interview the various officers or witnesses that they interviewed, the two officers who were referred to by Mr. Bascom, Mr. Blanham, and Mr. Caesar were apparently present. So it's like I said, I'm not sure how reliable that is, but we're in a rough state. That's all I'm gonna say.
Very rough state, Mr. Hughes. It's kind of like deja vu. We have gone through this for almost 20 years now. You've dealt with lots of cases, and we're not getting anywhere. It's 2022. We're back to square one again. You must be frustrated at the judicial system. When we think we're going 2 steps forward, we end up going 12 steps backward. We're back to square one, probably worse off than we have ever been in that country. Optimism of a better system, a better judicial system, a better police force. Any optimism at all, sir?
Mark, I don't want to be a pessimist, but I don't have any optimism. I'm afraid I am not particularly optimistic, and I don't think the so-called wealth that is coming to the country is going to change any of our capacities at the moment. If at the core there are fundamental flaws in how we operate, the fact that we have more money but we're fundamentally flawed doesn't solve the problem. And there doesn't seem to be a will or a commitment to restructuring the difficulties that we face in the society. So I'm terribly sorry that I have to admit that I don't expect anything different.
I got you, and I understand exactly where you're coming from, because after being there in the trenches, judicial trenches, so to speak, wanting for a better judicial system, judicial reform, and all these manner of things, we're back to square one, probably worse off this time because things are so bloody blatant. It's happening right in front of our face. And there's, I don't know. I just don't know. So here's where I'll just probably ask for closing remarks. But before we go there, people are eager to hear from Mr. Bascom again. Mr. Bascom, I know you are his lawyer, you speaking on his behalf. Are you guys going to have any press conference anytime soon?
10 o'clock tomorrow morning, press conference at our office.
You see, I have my sources. And I have my sources. I kind of thought that, but I wanted you to confirm. So you will have a press conference 10
Yep.
o'clock tomorrow.
Yep, 10 o'clock in the morning, we've got a press conference.
Your closing remarks, please, Mr. Nigel Hughes.
My closing remarks are really directed at your very younger audience. Not you, and certainly not me. I'm at the other end.
Please, Mr. Hughes, we had such a beautiful hour, 20 minutes, and please let's continue on that path.
No, young people have to decide what sort of society they want to live in. They have to decide what sort of Guyana they want to live in. They have to decide whether what they're prepared to accept as normal. And if this is what they want and this is how they think the society should function, who am I to challenge that? But at the end of the day, those people who are under 35, they are the ones who have to be concerned. And if they look at what's happening in the country and they are not disturbed, or they think because they're not affected by it, then it's okay. Then good luck to them. But people cannot avoid being responsible for the consequence of inaction. So if you want to be inactive and you want to say nothing about what is clearly going on, and the consequences of what we see going on are obvious. They have happened in several other countries, and you're comfortable with it, then that's fine. Who am I to say otherwise?
They should listen to exactly your words of wisdom, because, like you said, we are not 35, neither are we 45. I'm not going to say what we are. But Mr. Hughes, it's always a pleasure to speak with you. And I
Thank
feel
you.
your pain when my pain increases when you speak of that in that pessimistic sort of tone. I know you've always been an optimist, but nothing seems to be changing in our country for the better, especially our judicial system. We have lots of folks who are still incarcerated, awaiting trial. Some of them are on trumped up charges and all manner of things. I just saw today, or yet today, a 66-year-old man was arrested, probably for a little amount of cocaine for his smoking utensils. He arrested. Then on the quarantine at Auckland Village, Christina Munsami and Derek Munsami, husband and wife, arrested 4 grams of marijuana, arrested and jailed. I don't know, Mr. Hughes. Thank you for your time, man.
Thank you.
I know how you're feeling.
Allow me to just say to you, Mark, if
Sure.
I could, people don't realize how important it is to have people like yourself put yourself out on the front line repeatedly, just to share with the Guyanese people, whether they are in Guyana or in the diaspora, what is happening in Guyana. And I just want to record for the record my appreciation for your continued sustained efforts. I know that you're not getting any check from anybody to do this. And for what it's worth, you have my gratitude and appreciation.
And I thank you. I thank you so much. There are times when I'm like, I'm getting up there, Mr. Hughes. Got my kids in school. I'm getting up there. We seem to be fighting, but we're just going 2 steps backward because of a barren political system, a stubborn political system. With sometimes I question with whomever is in office. We just have to get the sort of changes. We're not getting it at all, and maybe in 2025 we'll see a Nigel Hughes.
No. Mark, you would have to be in much stronger substances than what you just referred to.
But you didn't allow me to finish in law, and you should know that you didn't allow me to finish the question.
No, I am long past politics,
right?
my friend.
And I was going to ask you in 2025, will we be having the same discussion on this show? But you didn't allow me to finish.
I hope for both of us.
You answer the question.
I hope for both of us that we're not in the same place, because you're gonna be like spinning top in mud. I don't wish to be here in 2025, talking about the same old problems. But
on the quarantine, we can't spin top in mud at all. It's a difficult task. Give my regards to Kathy. God bless you. Have a good night. Thank you, sir.
You too. Good night.
Yeah. Nigel Hughes there. always a pleasure to show. We've really got to go. We've got to go. But before we do, let me just remind you guys, in case you haven't heard this, that the Central Intelligence Agency of the U.S., they're investigating Chinese connections in Guyana. And I hope there's some CIA operative or some operative of some agency who might be watching this show. I hope that they will get on to this to find out whether Barrett Jackdaw has a bank account with hundreds of millions of dollars somewhere in China under a different name, of course. I hope to God that they will, and that the CIA folks, if the story is accurate, mind you, will go and interview the former Guyana ambassador to China, Chu, Miss Chu, An Yin Chu, Ni Hong Ma, right? An Yin Chu was ambassador to China, Guyana's ambassador to China, to investigate whether Barrett Jackdaw has a bank account in China. The CIA seems to be on, they seem to be on to something. And guess what? We're on to something else too. But we're on to this, our car, drive off. And oftentimes I say, I just wish my sister, my little sister, can have the opportunity to own this car someday. And those who know would know. And if you know, then you know why I'm saying. But this car is supposedly held out in Miami, can't get through to go to Guyana because the source of income is actually under investigations, according to information. But for now, I've got to go. My name is Mark Benshop. I'll be back tomorrow, same place, same time, right here on 107.1 FM. Hopefully, by the time you're here tomorrow, you'll hear that the DPP has done the right thing and reinstitute the charges against the crime chief, Mr. Blanham, and what else we can hope for. It's Guyana, right? And we haven't forgotten the Sioux matter. We haven't forgotten that at all, Jack dear. And we're not going to forget that. So don't think for a moment that we have forgotten that. We have not, and we will not. Sioux matter is still hot. All right, so let me say good evening to the opposition guys, them, right? Yeah, those members of parliament. Good evening to you guys. All right, if you need a lawyer here, we have our in-house lawyer, Miss Shellon Washington. Until tomorrow, same place, same time. God bless all of you. So long.
Hello, this is attorney Shellon Washington, owner and founder of the Washington Law Firm, located at 455 Utica Avenue in Brooklyn, New York. We're specialized in medical malpractice, personal injuries, matrimonial law, and landlord and tenant. If you're in need of legal representation, please give us a call today. The number to call is 718-877-3100. Consultation is free at no cost to you. So call us today to see if we can be of any assistance to your legal needs. Again, the phone number to call us is 718-877-3100. This is attorney Shellen Washington, owner and founder of the Washington law firm located at 455 Utica Avenue in Brooklyn, New York. We're specialized in medical malpractice, personal injuries, matrimonial law, and landlord and tenant. If you're in need of legal representation, please give us a call today. The number to call is 718-877-3100. Consultation is free at no cost to you. So call us today to see if we can be of any assistance to your legal needs. Again, the phone number to call us is 718-877-3100.
Mr. Watts, he is armed himself. Shots. Shots. Watch it. Tear gas. Live rounds. Also, I can see that.
Just for Quendon! The man is a boxer, man. Why can't put in a boxer, man, to do that?
But since my cousin there, no, you come on the East Coast.
You listen to me.
Right? No, you come on the East Coast.
You listen to me.
You gotta listen to me too, man.
I am listening to
Right?
you.
Now, I see you on the East Coast. The day when they get a protest of them, the next day, that's when you see one bigger heads come up to talk to my family. Right? And that's bad. If you didn't do a protest, you want to see nobody for justice. You see? I'm not holding back nothing. I'm not holding back nothing. I just need justice for my family.
I get visitors all of a sudden. All of a sudden, you have visitors. This is Joker. Who is that Joker? That piece of plum. They know who they did it with, you know.